Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw this week, Paul George, of all people, got suspended for 25 games for the use of improper medication. That's what they're called.
This isn't a rumor. This isn't a trade scenario. They dropped the hammer, a 25-game suspension that effectively ends his regular season. We are talking about nearly $12 million incinerated in seconds. The league calls it an anti-drug violation. George claims it's for his mental survival. But then the footage leaked, the timeline blurred, and the internet did what it does best. It went absolutely nuclear trying to uncover the truth. They're calling him Prescription P, and this 25-game ban hasn't just rocked the NBA, it's threatening to tear the Philadelphia 76 ERS apart. It all went down on January 31st, 2026, a date that will live in infamy for Sixers fans, when the league dropped a bombshell so heavy it shattered social media timelines instantly. The verdict was absolute. Philadelphia forward Paul George suspended immediately, 25 games, 0 pay for breaching the NBA's ironclad anti-drug protocols. The financial fallout is nothing short of catastrophic. We are looking at roughly $11.9 million in salary simply vanishing into thin air. George is pleading his case, citing improper medication, but when you lose nearly $12 million, improper feels like the understatement of the century. This is a 9-time All-Star, a 15-year veteran known for clutch daggers and suffocating defense, suddenly watching his legacy crumble in real time. 4 all-defensive selections mean nothing when you're barred from the arena, staring down a suspension that eats the rest of the 2025-26 campaign. The Sixers' playoff dreams were already on life support, hanging by a thread, and this suspension just walked into the room and pulled the plug. Remember, this is the same franchise that pushed all their chips to the center of the table, committing $212 million to George just 18 months ago. That news didn't just land hard. It hit like a freight train derailment, sending the entire organization into a state of absolute emergency. When ESPN's Shams Charania broke the story, the narrative spun out of control immediately, George blaming medication for a personal mental health crisis. He put out the standard PR firefighting statement, apologizing to the front office, the locker room, the fans promising to get his mind right. He swears he's going to use this exile to rebuild his body and mental state, but can a team trust a star who just cost them their season? The NBA is keeping the files sealed standard operating procedure, refusing to name the specific chemical that triggered the positive test. League sources confirmed it wasn't performance-enhancing drugs, but that little detail did absolutely nothing to stop the bleeding. In fact, saying at times wasn't time steroids only poured gasoline on the fire, feeding the internet's hunger for chaos, scandal, and dark theories. We witnessed the real-time destruction of a reputation, as complex human struggles were ground down into viral content before the ink on the press release was even dry. The digital mob was ruthless. Within minutes, the memes were flying, and the disrespect was trending globally. Prescription P, Drug P, the nicknames flooded X and TikTok, turning a serious career crisis into a worldwide punchline. The clarification about PEDs didn't matter. The jokes were savage, relentless, and impossible to escape. The court of public opinion doesn't wait for evidence. It delivers the verdict instantly, and for Paul George, it was guilty on all counts. Fans were out for blood, crafting brutal one-liners while parody accounts hijacked the narrative completely. Fantasy owners were in panic mode, torching their rosters, but beneath the chaos, a darker question was forming. The curiosity is eating everyone alive. Fans, analysts, insiders, we all need to know the answer to the one question nobody is answering. What specifically was in his system? The NBA and Players Association banned substance list is a minefield that goes way deeper than people realize. We aren't just talking street drugs. The policy aggressively targets benzodiazepines, alprazolam, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium. These are heavy-duty anxiety meds categorized alongside hard drugs of abuse, and if you don't have the paperwork, you are done. Then you have the stimulants, Adderall standard for ADHD in the real world, but in the league, it's a banned substance. You can't just pop a pill because your doctor said so. Without a therapeutic use exemption, you are walking into a trap. It's a strict, bureaucratic nightmare requiring league medical approval, not just a note from your personal physician. And the list gets darker. Ketamine, LSD, cocaine, synthetic cathinones. It's a wide net cast to catch everything. The policy doesn't care if you're partying or hurting. It lumps recreational users and therapeutic seekers into the same banned bucket. But here is the twist that makes this story sting. Insiders are suggesting the drug itself isn't the main crime. It's the secrecy. It's the fact that he allegedly went outside the team's medical wall and hid the truth from the people paying him millions. The 25-game ban screams one thing loud and clear. Unauthorized medication, even for mental health, is a career-threatening gamble. If you bypass the team doctors and get caught, the league will not hesitate to make an example out of you. It forces you to wonder, what was he taking that he was so desperate to keep hidden from the Sixers training staff? Is it our business? Maybe not. Maybe a man's mental health is his own private war. But when you sign a contract worth hundreds of millions, do you surrender your right to privacy? The team owns the asset, so do they own the truth? This isn't just about basketball anymore. It's a brutal collision between corporate ownership, human vulnerability, and the harsh reality of pro sports. The NBA is trying to navigate mental health, but this suspension proves that when the rules are broken, the hammer still falls, and it falls hard. The bombshell dropped out of nowhere, confirming that Paul George's suspension wasn't about street drugs, but a prescription written by a private doctor instead of the team's approved medical staff. That might sound like a minor detail, but in the league's ironclad anti-drug policy, it is the difference between a simple mistake and a full-blown violation. Now, the question that is haunting everyone is simple. Did George hide this on purpose? Was he terrified of the stigma surrounding mental health medication? Or was he just another victim of the league's impossible maze of paperwork and therapeutic exemptions? We may never know the truth, but the verdict is brutal and final. 25 games wiped from the schedule, nearly $12 million in salary set on fire, and a superstar's private health dragged into the unforgiving glare of the national spotlight. But wait, it gets deeper. The timing of this suspension feels way too convenient, sending shockwaves of suspicion through the entire basketball world. The internet is already ablaze with theories that George triggered a random drug test after dropping an explosive 32 points on the Milwaukee Bucks on January 27th, 2026, just 4 days before the hammer fell. You have to admit, the logic is terrifyingly plausible. It screams conspiracy. Think about it. George had been cruising with a modest 16 points per game for most of the season, flying under the radar. Then, boom! He erupts for 32 against a top-tier contender. That kind of sudden dominance is exactly what wakes up the league's testing agents. But the detectives on social media found something even louder. A smoking gun that went viral days before the official news even broke. Many fans are now looking back at this specific moment as the nail in the coffin, the exact second Paul George sealed his own fate. I remember seeing the footage surface just 48 hours before the story broke. Paul George in the layup line, throwing down casual 360 dunks like he was a rookie again. And let's be real for a second. At his age, with his medical file, that just doesn't happen. The second I saw that clip, I knew the league was watching. I called it immediately. You don't do that kind of stuff in warm-ups without raising red flags. Seriously. Go look at the tape. It's unnatural. We are talking about a 35-year-old Paul George, a man whose biography is written in scars, including that horrific leg fracture in Las Vegas back in 2014 that almost ended it all. Yet there he was, soaring alongside Tyrese Maxey, throwing down windmills and 360s with an ease that shouldn't be possible. It was almost too perfect. It was jarring. It looked less like a warm-up and more like a challenge to Father Time himself. This is a guy who has been under the knife more times than we can count, fought through chronic shoulder agony in LA, and limped into the 2025-26 season. At an age where most forwards are icing their knees on the bench or sitting on their couch at home, George looked superhuman. That layup line video wasn't just a highlight, it was a beacon begging the league to come and take a closer look. And they did. That moment of brilliance brought scrutiny that would cost him 8 figures and destroy a massive chunk of his season. But if the suspension was the earthquake that shook the foundation, the viral clip that followed was the tsunami that drowned everything in its path. Just as the news broke, the internet dug up an old video from February 2025, and the timing could not have been more devastating. It was footage of George joking around with Joel Embiid, laughing about the brutal reality of staying on the court. In the clip, George looks at the camera and casually says, "Drugs help me." Originally, it was just locker room talk, harmless banter between two beaten-up warriors laughing off the physical toll of an 82-game grind. It was just a veteran keeping it real, making a self-deprecating joke about the endless cycle of recovery. We are talking about anti-inflammatories, cortisone shots, the legal cocktails that every aging legend needs just to lace up their sneakers. But drop that clip right in the middle of a 25-game suspension scandal, it's a PR nightmare. It transformed instantly into a weapon of mass humiliation, surgically deployed by trolls to inflict maximum damage on his reputation. The video went nuclear across X, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, racking up millions of views before the ink on the suspension letter was even dry. The comment sections turned into a war zone, with everyone recycling the same cruel joke, competing to see who could mock him the hardest. Fans froze the frame right at the moment he uttered those 3 infamous words, creating the meme that would define the entire week. You couldn't escape it. That image was everywhere, haunting every timeline and feed. It was shared, stitched, quoted, and remixed by every sports account with a Wi-Fi connection, turning a throwaway line into a confession. Suddenly, content creators who couldn't name 5 players on the roster were experts on Paul George's medical history. Everyone had an opinion on his personal pharmaceutical choices, fueled by a 5-second clip stripped of all nuance. It was a viral sensation in every sense of the word, but it was also aggressively, dangerously misleading, because nobody wanted to talk about the context. The mob didn't care that George wasn't confessing to illegal drug use. He wasn't admitting to cheating. He wasn't giving us a tour of a secret stash. He was making the kind of dark joke that any 34-year-old with bad knees and a decade of NBA mileage would make to get through the day. It was a moment of vulnerability about the pain it takes to play at this level. But in the court of public opinion, the truth didn't matter, only the headline did. He wasn't talking about back alley deals. He was referencing the grit, the grind, and the league-approved survival kit that keeps every NBA veteran from falling apart. But let's be honest, rational context doesn't stop the scroll. Subtlety, it dies a quiet death on social media. And the ruthless algorithm has never once pushed a post that dared to whisper, wait, this situation is actually way more complex than it looks. This brings us to the boiling point, the explosive headline claiming new footage of Paul George taking drugs with teammates, which demands the most aggressive correction of this entire breakdown. And this is a truth that needs to be screamed from the rafters until it drowns out the noise. No legitimate newsbreaker, no insider, and not a single verified source has produced 1 second of footage showing Paul George using drugs, recreational or otherwise, with his squad. It is a ghost story. It simply does not exist. You can scour the archives of ESPN, tear apart AP News, hunt through CBS, Yahoo, and the darkest corners of TikTok or Twitter, and you will find absolutely zero proof to back up these wild accusations. But here is what times out there. The weaponized, resurfaced drugs help me clip. It's old footage, ripped from its timeline, stripped of truth, and fed to a machine engineered to prioritize shock value and outrage over fairness or reality. The viral misinformation engine fired on all cylinders, executing a perfect hit job where every gear turned the next. The suspension itself was the anchor, a cold, hard, league-confirmed fact that gave a terrifying sense of legitimacy to the lies that followed. Then came the visual evidence, that twisted, out-of-context clip that looked damning if you didn't know better. The internet mob provided the branding, turning a serious disciplinary issue into a ruthless meme that spread faster than the truth ever could. And the silence? The lack of official details created a vacuum that was instantly flooded with toxicity, rumors, and straight-up fabrication. In a heartbeat, casual fans scrolling through their feeds were sold a story that was essentially fiction masquerading as news. They bought into a narrative where Paul George was partying recklessly on camera with teammates, a scenario that is completely divorced from reality. Then Charles Barkley walked onto the set of Inside the NBA and poured gasoline on the inferno. He looked into the camera and called George's mental health explanation fishy, openly challenging the player's integrity in front of millions of viewers. When Sir Charles speaks, it hits different. His skepticism lands with the force of a sledgehammer in the basketball world. He is one of the untouchable gods of sports media, a voice that people trust implicitly. So when he publicly doubted the official story, he essentially gave a permission slip to millions of fans to call Paul George a liar. That is the kind of soundbite that echoes for weeks, dominating every barbershop debate and group chat across the basketball internet. Suddenly, it was open season. Michael Irvin jumped into the fray, cracking jokes and drawing parallels to his own infamous history with substance abuse. The conversation had completely gone off the rails, detached from facts, and running purely on vibes, comedy, and chaos. Now, I saw the comment section turning into a war room, with people claiming, oh, it's gotta be weed, ignoring the fact that the NBA stopped testing for marijuana years ago. But then people watched the tape, saw him flying through the air, attacking the rim with that vintage explosion, and the whispers turned into shouts. Maybe he and LeBron are seeing the same doctor? Just a joke? Or a suspicion rooted in disbelief? That LeBron comparison wasn't just a throwaway line, it struck a nerve, tapping into the darkest, most whispered conspiracy in pro sports. It is the shadowy belief that these elite veterans, defying father time deep into their 30s, must be on something stronger than kale smoothies. The idea that their longevity is fueled by something illicit rather than just sleep optimization and hyperbaric chambers. It is the cloud that hangs over legends like LeBron James, Tom Brady, and Cristiano Ronaldo. Are they simply human, or are they science experiments? It is the ultimate unanswered question, a suspicion that can never be proven, which makes it impossible to kill. George's suspension gave the conspiracy theorist red meat a tangible violation by a veteran who had just shown shocking athleticism. Even though the official report had nothing to do with performance enhancers, the timing felt too convenient for the skeptics to ignore. Then you add the money, the staggering financial stakes that turned this drama into a tragedy. This story already had enough layers to choke a news cycle, but the cash involved took it to a different stratosphere. We are talking about a 4-year, $212 million Supermax deal signed in July 2024, the contract that was supposed to save Philadelphia. And now, in just his second season, he is lighting nearly $12 million on fire because of a medication he claims was for his mental health. Let that sink in for a second. It is absolutely gut-wrenching. For 25 games, he is forfeiting around $11 million. Just try to wrap your head around that number. You take a pill to stabilize your mood, to fight off the demons, and the price tag is $11 million? That is a financial death sentence for most people, an amount equal to 5 lifetimes of grinding at a regular job. It underscores the ruthless, zero-tolerance nature of the league's policy and the brutal reality that when the NBA drops the hammer, it destroys everything in its path. In the high-stakes world of the NBA, the drug testing policy is a loaded gun with a hair trigger. It operates on strict liability, which means there is zero room for error. The league doesn't care about your intent, they don't want to hear your medical justifications, and frankly, your personal circumstances are completely irrelevant. The second a banned substance shows up in your system without that golden ticket of approved exemption paperwork, the hammer drops, and there is nowhere to hide. Paul George is staring down the barrel of a career-defining nightmare, realizing too late that this lesson comes with a catastrophic price tag both to his reputation and his bank account. His case isn't just bad luck. It slots perfectly into a terrifying pattern of 25-game suspensions that are shaking the league to its core. This growing list exposes a dark secret. Countless NBA stars are running afoul of this unforgiving policy for reasons that swing wildly from cold-blooded, deliberate cheating to heartbreaking administrative screw-ups. But as PG faces the long, lonely road back, the question haunting everyone is, can he ever truly recover? Let's be clear, Paul George's 25-game banishment is not a glitch in the Matrix. It is the machine working exactly as designed. He is just the latest name carved into a memorial wall of players who walk this exact same path, facing the same brutal penalty under strangely similar shadows. Rewind to February 2025. The Milwaukee Bucks are surging, and then disaster strikes. Forward Bobby Portis gets slapped with a 25-game suspension after testing positive for tramadol, a heavy-hitting opioid banned by both the NBA and the World Anti-Doping Agency. Portis and his agent, Mark Bartelstein, went on the offensive, screaming from the rooftops that this was a tragic, honest mistake. They claimed Portis thought he was taking Toradol, a completely legal, league-approved painkiller used to numb the agony of the grind, often injected on game days to manage a screaming elbow injury that had been plaguing him since the leaves fell the previous autumn. The pill reportedly came from a personal assistant's prescription bottle, a tiny decision that triggered an avalanche. No one accused him of trying to cheat the game, but the policy is a cold-hearted judge. It demands strict liability regardless of your intent or how sad your story might be. Flashback to January 2024, and the narrative gets darker. Cleveland Cavaliers center Tristan Thompson is hit with that same 25-game sentence after his test came back glowing red for ibutamorin, a growth hormone secretagogue, and LGD4033, a selective androgen receptor modulator. These aren't accidental pain meds. These are unambiguously classified as hardcore performance-enhancing drugs designed to build a monster. Unlike the tragic mix-up with Portis or the mystery surrounding George, Thompson had no cover story. These substances are for gaining an edge, plain and simple. Thompson didn't fight it, he owned the mistake, took full responsibility, and served his time in silence without filing a single appeal. He later claimed the exile flew by, channeling his frustration into a Rocky-style training camp to force a dominant return. November 2019. The Atlanta Hawks lose a cornerstone when forward John Collins is sidelined for 25 games. The charge? Testing positive for growth hormone releasing peptide 2, yet another banned substance that artificially stimulates the body's power. Collins stood before the cameras, apologizing to his teammates and the fans, vowing to fight the ruling, but the silence on that appeal's outcome spoke volumes. That same bloody October, the number 1 overall pick from the 2018 draft, Phoenix Suns center DeAndre Ayton, felt the wrath of the league. He was busted for a diuretic, a pill often used as a masking agent to scrub the bloodstream clean and hide other dark secrets from the testers. When you connect the dots across these scandals, a terrifying and uncomfortable reality begins to emerge about the NBA's drug program. It reveals that the system is not just strict, it is a blunt instrument and capable of nuance. The 25-game suspension is the standard guillotine for a first offense, and it falls with equal crushing force whether you are a victim of an accidentally ingested painkiller, a cheater injecting steroids, or someone desperate for mental health meds without the right stamp of approval. At the first offense level, the policy is blind. It makes absolutely no distinction between a clerical error and malicious intent. This is a calculated design choice that prioritizes fear and competitive integrity over individual fairness, leaving players exposed. Just ask Wilson Chandler, who saw his world crumble in August 2019 with a 25-game ban for ipamorelin, a growth hormone peptide he claimed was for injury rehab before he even signed with the Brooklyn Nets, a mistake that cost him $650,000. He learned the same unforgiving lesson that haunts the locker rooms today. The league does not forgive. The NBA's testing vial does not care times Y times the substance is in your body. It only cares that it times is times there. And if you think 25 games is bad, remember that in the league's eyes, that is the mercy rule repeat offenders face total annihilation. Look at the cautionary tale of Toronto Raptors guard Jalen Harris. In July 2021, he wasn't just suspended, he was dismissed and disqualified from the league entirely. That is a permanent banishment, a career death sentence that can only be reversed by begging a review board for reinstatement. It echoes the dark ages of the 1980s and 90s, where cocaine violations led to multi-year exiles and lifetime bans. Legends like Michael Ray Richardson faced a permanent ban in 1986, and Roy Tarpley saw his immense talent rot away due to suspension after suspension. The modern NBA claims to be more compassionate and rehabilitative for first-timers, but looking at the wreckage left behind, does it really feel that way? Even for a first-time offender, the fallout here is catastrophic, a competitive death sentence that carries penalties heavy enough to shatter a superstar's season, destroy a meticulously built reputation, and drain millions from a bank account in the blink of an eye. For Paul George, this isn't just a suspension. It is a legacy-defining crisis with a brutal timeline that puts Philadelphia's championship dreams in a chokehold. The clock started ticking the moment the hammer dropped, forcing him to the sidelines for the Sixers' clash with the New Orleans Pelicans on January 31st, 2026. He is exiled until March 25th, 2026, when Philadelphia hosts the Chicago Bulls, a date that feels an eternity away. By the time he steps back onto the hardwood, the Sixers will be staring down the barrel of just 10 regular season games left on the schedule. That is a razor-thin margin for error, asking a star to shake off the heavy rust of a 2-month layoff and somehow reintegrate with teammates who have spent 25 grueling games learning to survive without him, all while trying to salvage a playoff spot that is slipping through their fingers every single night he sits out. As of February 7th, 2026, the verdict stands absolute, no appeals, no mercy, no reductions, coming to save the day. George is locked in to serve every agonizing second of this full 25-game banishment. Yet, in the face of this disaster, the Sixers front office is playing a fascinating game of poker, projecting a calm, diplomatic unity that screams damage control. General Manager Daryl Morey stepped into the spotlight to publicly shield his star, voicing frustration with the situation. But doubling down on his bet, insisting that George remains an untouchable pillar of this franchise alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, head coach Nick Nurse threw a lifeline, confirming that George is still allowed inside the fortress of the practice facility during this dark period, keeping him physically ready and mentally tethered to the squad, even as he is forced to watch the actual battles from the shadows. Surprisingly, the team hasn't collapsed yet, showing a gritty resilience that has fans cautiously holding their breath. Philadelphia scrapped their way to a 3-1 record in the first 4 games of this saga, fueled by the explosive energy of Kelly Oubre Jr. and the relentless ascent of Maxey, who is rapidly evolving from a sidekick into a legitimate offensive weapon and playmaker. But look closer at the books, and you find a cynical twist. This suspension is actually saving the front office a mountain of cash. George's lost checks have gifted the organization a luxury tax credit of roughly $5.8 million. $8 million in luxury tax credits. That is half his lost wages, gone in a blink. It helped Philadelphia skirt the tax apron, sure, but you have to ask yourself, did this financial loophole force the front office into a corner? Did it paralyze them at the February 5th trade deadline? It looks suspiciously quiet, too quiet. But forget the money for a second. The price paid on the hardwood? That is astronomical. It is a cost you can't calculate until the lights go out in the postseason. We are talking about Paul George. The man was putting up 16 points, ripping down 5.1 boards, and dishing 3.7 assists a night across 27 games. But numbers lie. They don't tell you he was the shield, the best perimeter defender on the roster. He is the guy you throw at the opposing team's monster to stop the bleeding. He is the difference between a championship parade and a first-round exit. He brings the intangibles, the grit, the hustle, the plays that do not show up in the box score but absolutely decide the outcome of the war. The analysts are crunching the numbers, giving the Sixers a 73 to 74% shot at the playoffs. But that is without George. That path looks terrifyingly like a play-in tournament nightmare if this squad cannot find a way to claw up the standings while their star sits in exile. Step back, though. Look at the massive, ugly picture forming here. This is not just about playoff seeds or luxury tax mathematics. George's suspension has ripped the bandage off a wound the NBA has been trying to hide for years. We are staring down the barrel of a massive controversy. This is a collision course between mental health, the pressure cooker of pro sports, and a drug testing system. A system built to catch steroid cheats and recreational users, now trapping players who are just desperate for medical help. We are talking about guys trying to treat conditions that carry a heavy dark stigma in the locker room. The league's policy? Strict liability, zero tolerance. It protects the game's integrity, or so they claim. But at what cost? It is creating a brutal tension, punishing players who are navigating the terrifying, lonely road of mental health treatment. Is the rule book broken, or is it just heartless? When George came out and blamed his violation on mental health care, that was not an excuse. That was a plea. A rare moment of raw courage from a superstar. And how did the world respond to that vulnerability? Did they offer a hand? No. They tore him apart. Memes. Ridicule. A viral circus of mockery. No empathy. No understanding. Just laughter from the cheap seats. It reveals a sickening truth about where we really stand on mental health in sports. We love the slogans, but when a hero falls, we love the drama more. And then there is the phantom footage. The internet swore it existed. A smoking gun video of Paul George using drugs with other NBA stars. It supposedly went viral. It was supposed to be the proof of some massive underground scandal that would rock the league. Guess what? It was a lie. A total fabrication born from the chaos of the suspension news. It was a resurfaced joke clip, twisted out of context by bad actors. An army of trolls and meme makers who do not care about the truth. They only care about clicks, engagement, and watching the world burn. They destroyed a man's reputation before the facts even had a chance to breathe. Here is the real story. Stripped of the noise. You have a veteran gladiator who sought help for a mental battle but took the wrong exit. He failed to navigate the league's maze of red tape, and for that mistake, he is paying a price that would bankrupt most people, both financially and emotionally. It is a human tragedy. It is complex. It requires you to actually think and feel. But who has time for nuance when there is blood in the water? Patience and empathy are dead currencies on the modern web. We trade an outrage now, and business is booming. Paul George is set to return on March 25th, 2026. Mark that date in blood. He will have exactly 10 games to prove he is still the $212 million man. We are talking about a 9-time All-Star, a 2019 MVP candidate who dropped 28 a game and led the league in steals. A legend. This is a two-way force of nature with 4 all-defensive selections. A clutch killer who has carried franchises on his back from Indiana to OKC to LA and now Philly. A 15-year war veteran. Can he rise from the ashes one more time? By the time he steps back on that court, the internet will have moved on. They will be chasing the next victim, the next outrage, the next misleading headline, the next lie that feels good to scream about. The cycle never stops. It just reloads. And Paul George, Prescription P, the guy who used to throw down 360 windmills like gravity did not exist, he is just the latest cog to get chewed up and spit out by the machine. Thanks for watching. Do not look away. Click the other cards on the screen for more stories they do not want you to hear.